Hey guys, tonight we're slipping quietly into the damp, cobbled world of 18th century England fog hanging in the air like a half-remembered dream. The first rays of a sleepy sun just beginning to stretch across fields still heavy with dew. You're standing outside a village post house, just a humble brick structure with soot-darkened windows and a cat that looks older than the king. And there you are, wrapping a frayed scarf around your neck, pulling a stiff leather satchel over your shoulder. You're a postman. Georgian era. Congratulations. You probably won't survive this without blisters. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop your city and local time in the comments. I love seeing where you're all listening from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You step outside. The mist is so thick you can barely see the road ahead, but that doesn't stop you from starting your rounds. The damp smell of moss, horse dung, and yesterday's rain welcomes you to another thrilling day of deliveries. Your boots squelch in the muddy ruts left behind by merchant carts. You barely dodge a sleepy goose that gives you the side-eye before going back to whatever geese do when they're not being a menace. Your satchel already feels like it's filled with bricks. And, in a way, it is. Some of the packages are oddly shaped, one's leaking, and another is buzzing faintly. You decide not to think too hard about that one. You shift the weight of the bag and begin your route, ducking under signs and low-hanging laundry like a polite hunchback with a mission. Most routes start early before breakfast, and depending on your region, your journey could be 10 miles or more on foot. If you're lucky, you'll hitch a ride on a mail coach later. But for now, it's just you, the mud, and the awkward swaying of your overburdened bag. The strap digs into your shoulder. It's a familiar pain, like a hug from a particularly clingy ghost made of wet rope. You pass a thatched cottage with a barking spaniel on the stoop. Its owner peeks out, nods sleepily, and holds out a hand for his copy of the London Gazette. You oblige, slipping the dampened paper into his outstretched palm before trundling on. You didn't even break stride. It's a dance you've done dozens of times. Rain or shine, or snow, or fog thick enough to hide a marching band. Along the road, you pass two men arguing over the price of turnips. You don't stop, but you do slow down just enough to hear one of them say, "Well, your turnips are soft, Harold." You make a mental note to never buy vegetables from Harold and keep moving. At your next stop, you hand over 3 sealed letters to a stern-looking woman wearing a bonnet that could probably deflect cannon fire. She thanks you with a nod so slight it might just have been a muscle spasm. Georgian politeness is nothing if not deeply restrained. As the morning wears on, the fog begins to lift, and the birds remember they're supposed to be cheerful. A robin hops along beside you for a bit, eyeing your crumbs. Yes, you brought a half-stale biscuit for the road. You break a piece and toss it to him. You may be a postman, but you're not heartless. You reach a manor house with a drive so long it might qualify as a public road. The postmaster insists you deliver directly to the door. You consider pretending you forgot this one, but your conscience and the looming image of your superior's eyebrows push you forward. Up the gravel path, past 2 marble lions that you're pretty sure move slightly when you're not looking. Inside your satchel, the letters jostle together, some pressed so tightly the ink has started to smudge onto their neighbors. A few are written on vellum, others on recycled parchment, with handwriting that ranges from elegant flourishes to chicken scratch composed during an earthquake. One envelope is sealed with dark red wax and bears an unfamiliar crest. You don't ask questions. That's a good way to lose your job, or worse, end up with someone's opinion about court politics. Historians still argue whether postmen of the time were strictly forbidden from reading the letters they carried. Some accounts suggest that boredom and curiosity occasionally got the better of them, particularly when the route was long and the letter smelled faintly of perfume. Around midday, you stop near a creek and rest on a fallen log. Your feet are already sore, your back is muttering something unkind, and your satchel is suspiciously damp near the bottom. You hope it's the jam package and not that letter with the odd smell. You pull out a flask of weak tea and take a sip. It's lukewarm and slightly metallic, but at least it's not rainwater. You nibble on the rest of your biscuit while watching a toad slowly cross the path in front of you. It feels like he's going faster than you did that morning. A gust of wind kicks up. You tighten the satchel flap and pull your coat closer. Just a few more stops. Just a few more complaints about soggy letters and missing issues of the ladies. Monthly museum. Just a few more overly friendly spaniels and indifferent aristocrats. And then, finally, you'll be back at the post house, where you can unload the satchel, rub your shoulder, and wonder why you ever thought this job might come with a pension. But for now, you rise again, hoist the bag, and start walking. The fog may have lifted, but your satchel hasn't gotten any lighter. You haven't even made it halfway through your route, and already the satchel feels as if it's developed a vendetta. It swings against your hip with every step, creaking softly like a leather ghost moaning its displeasure at your posture. You try adjusting the strap, then the other shoulder, then both, and briefly consider just dragging it behind you like an old cabbage sack. But no, you're a Georgian postman. And Georgian postmen carry on, preferably without becoming known as the one who lost the bishop's tax forms in a puddle. You find a nice flat stone fence and decide to take a moment to investigate the enemy, your satchel. You place it gently down, unlatch the heavy brass buckle, and flip the flap open. Inside, chaos. At first glance, there's a fairly ordinary pile of letters and small parcels, nothing alarming. But then you start shifting through, and the oddities emerge. One is a rolled-up map tied with twine, with a wax seal that's already half cracked. Another is a soft cloth package, the contents uncertain but oddly squishy. There's a musky scent that you're fairly sure is sheep-related. You gently push it back to the bottom, pretending you didn't see it. There's a tiny wooden box addressed in a hand so neat it looks printed. You shake it. It rattles faintly, like tiny bones or perhaps just buttons. Still, it's unsettling. You place it carefully to one side, resisting the urge to open it just to know what on earth Mr. Bartholomew Feathers of Lower Buntingham finds important enough to mail in a pine box. Next, you find a thick bundle of folded letters tied together with a blue ribbon. No address, no stamps. Just a single slip of paper that says, "Deliver in confidence." Right? That's not ominous at all. Georgian England, where espionage, romance, and questionable etiquette often traveled in the same wrapper. And there it is, finally, the letter you've been dreading. The one with the greasy stain in the corner and the scent of pickled something. It's the third time old Mrs. Haddock has mailed you a note to her cousin in Wiltshire, along with what appears to be a sample of her homemade eel jelly. You set it down gently, so gently, and then pretend to wipe your hands on your coat sleeve because you're not convinced the jar didn't leak. Somewhere underneath the letters is the official Post House Ledger, a worn leather-bound book where you record successful deliveries, recipient signatures, and which dogs barked with intent to maim. Georgian bureaucracy doesn't sleep, even if you do. You take a moment to mentally sort the categories. There are government letters sealed with elaborate wax crests, personal notes wrapped in lace-edged parchment, business transactions with frighteningly small script, and one envelope marked "Private Eyes Only" with 4 underlines and no return address. You wonder whose eyes, exactly, since it has passed through at least 4 other postal hands before reaching yours. Still, you dutifully resist the urge to peek, mostly because the envelope is surprisingly well glued. There's also a small linen pouch of coins with a note that reads, "To be delivered only upon receipt of the piglet." You blink? Piglet? There is no piglet in your satchel. You check again, slightly worried. No piglet, no grunting, no tiny trotters. Either the piglet was posted separately or someone is going to be very disappointed. Historians still debate whether it was standard for postmen to carry livestock-related correspondence or actual livestock in their rounds. Some rural accounts mention the occasional hand-delivered chicken or bag of feed tied to a postboy's saddle. Others insist that's folklore invented by drunk poets in alehouses with too much time and too few mailmen. You gently press down the jumble of letters and try to reclose the satchel. It bulges like a poorly packed suitcase before a seaside holiday. You rearrange a few bundles, press out some of the air, and finally get the flap shut, just barely. The buckle snaps with a noise that suggests you shouldn't test it again unless you're ready for a dramatic explosion of stationery. You hoist the bag back over your shoulder. The leather creaks again, this time with a long sigh of mutual disappointment. Along the road, the village slowly comes to life. You pass a baker pulling fresh loaves from the oven, their scent so delicious you briefly consider using a love letter as payment. A child runs past holding a wooden hoop, the kind that rolls endlessly without purpose, just like your route. An old man leans out of a window and calls down, "Any letters for me, lad?" You pause. Check your satchel. Yes, one. He grins, toothless and triumphant, as you hand it over. "From my niece in Norwich," he says proudly, though the envelope is blank. You don't question it. Further along, you drop off a note at the blacksmith's. He doesn't look up from his work, but grunts in acknowledgement. A dog watches you suspiciously from under a wagon. You sidestep quickly. You've learned the hard way that even the nicest dogs get territorial when it comes to oddly scented. Satchels. The sun is climbing now. The road is warming, and so is your back. The weight of the satchel seems to increase with each letter remove, as if each delivery makes the remaining ones grumpier. You shift the strap again. It doesn't help. Nothing short of a second postman and possibly a donkey will help at this point. Farmer's wife hands you a return letter along with a slice of slightly burned barley loaf. You thank her, bite in, and nearly break a tooth. You consider using the bread as an impromptu writing tablet. It might be more durable than some of the envelopes. Still, you press on, your satchel slightly lighter, your steps slightly heavier. By the time you reach the next crossroad, you've memorized the arrangement of every pouch and packet in your bag. You could probably describe the texture of each envelope in your sleep. One letter is embossed. One smells of violets. One hums faintly, which you are still choosing not to investigate. You adjust your cap, glance up at the slightly kinder sky, and sigh. There's still a full afternoon ahead. Still letters to hand over, news to deliver, and the haunting fear that you might have forgotten one important package, buried deep under the eel jelly. You've reached the edge of the village now, where the road gets narrow and the hedgerows look like they're plotting something. A magpie hops along the stone wall beside you like a nosy neighbor. The satchel, now just barely lighter, still, bumps your hip with every step, as if reminding you it hasn't given up its secrets yet. And in fairness, neither have the letters inside. You pause under a leaning oak tree to catch your breath and decide, with the resigned patience of a man who's forgotten what a warm fire feels like, to take a closer look at some of today's more curious correspondence. You unlatch the buckle again and start sifting. At the top of the pile lies a letter sealed with deep blue wax stamped in the shape of a peacock. Fancy. The parchment is thick, almost absurdly so, and smells faintly of cinnamon. It's addressed to Lady Barrow, the upper parlor, 3rd floor, left, Wisteria House, beyond the bakery, turn right at the willow tree. You frown. That's more directions than address. Historians still argue whether the Georgian Postal Service preferred precise routes or poetic landmarks, but evidence suggests, well, both. Often at once, you tuck it carefully aside and dig. Deeper. Next, you find several folded sheets with broken wax seals. The letters are dated from last month and clearly already opened return to sender messages. Some have scribbled notes across the front like nitrogen monoxide such person, or the slightly crueler, try the pub. You sigh, the heartbreak of misaddressed. Mail is one of your daily woes. You imagine some poor soul awaiting a love letter that never arrives. Or worse, receiving one meant for someone else entirely. That happened last Thursday. You don't want to talk about it. Then, nestled among the folds, you spot something new, a small leather wallet, no bigger than your palm, tied shut with red twine. Curious. No name, no address. You untie it. Yes, you're allowed to look it. Has no destination, and find inside a single sheet of folded vellum. On it, in spidery black ink, if found, do not read. You fold it back up, carefully, and slide it into a side pocket of the satchel, where you can pretend it never existed. Now, to the good part, the letter's sealed with wax. There's something deeply satisfying about wax-sealed letters, isn't there? The gentle ridges, the snap of the seal breaking, the small personal emblem pressed into soft red or black or gold wax. Georgians took their wax sealing seriously. It wasn't just aesthetic, it was security. You could tell if someone had opened your mail. And if your seal was particularly intricate, you could also tell if they had bad taste. Families had signets. With coats of arms or custom insignias, birds, fleurs de lis, unicorns, sometimes things less dignified like squirrels or sausages. You once saw a seal shaped like a dancing ferret. You don't ask questions anymore. Many upper-class households even kept multiple sealing waxes colors denoting urgency, tone, or even mood. A black seal? Morning. Blue? Business? Green? Garden party, perhaps? Red was standard for most letters. But gold was reserved for very important people, or those who thought they were. Some postal historians still argue whether colored wax played a true logistical role in routing letters, or if it was just Georgian drama at its finest. Either way, you respect the effort. Your own letters, if you ever wrote any, would be sealed in plain brown, purely because your fingers are far too cold in the mornings to wrestle with melted wax. Speaking of melting, many wax seals don't. Fare well in the rain, and it rains often. Which is why your satchel has an oiled canvas lining, at least in theory. In practice, it leaks at the corners, and once, an entire sheet of poetry blurred into a surreal ink puddle that looked vaguely like a judgmental owl. You find a love letter now instantly recognizable from the flourished handwriting, perfume scent, and way it's been folded with obsessive symmetry. Addressed only to Miss A, third window facing the courtyard. Again, very helpful. You hold it up to the light, and yes, you can just make out the faintest outline of a pressed flower sealed inside. It's a daisy, maybe, or a very flat spider. Either way, it's delicate. You tuck it carefully into the safest inner pouch, away from the pickled eel note and that humming envelope. Every so often, you deliver messages where the wax seal is all that matters. That tiny emblem tells the reader who sent it, and often whether they'll read it with joy, dread, or a long sigh. A letter sealed with the Bishop of Norwich's crest? That's going to be theological, likely longer than a Sunday sermon, and probably includes at least 3 Latin phrases and a gentle rebuke about someone's shoes. There's also an emerging trend you've noticed lately: seals pressed with tiny gears or compasses. These are from the new natural philosophers, the people who will one day be called scientists. You once delivered a letter that smelled strongly of mercury. You wore gloves for 2 days afterward. And then, of course, there are the prank seals. You've heard rumors of wax stamps shaped like human noses, rude gestures, or even tiny frogs. Most likely made by idle young men with too much pocket money. And not enough supervision, but the wax itself? Still perfectly legitimate. As long as it seals the letter, it's legal tender for the Georgian post. You close the satchel again with some difficulty. The sun is high now, and the birds are fully committed to their sing-along. Your coat is far too warm. Your scarf is unraveling, and you're pretty sure one of the buttons is gone, probably stuck in someone's front gate latch. But you smile to yourself as you step back onto the path, because no matter how odd the contents, no matter how eccentric the seals or mysterious the messages, you carry them all the same with care, curiosity, and just a hint of suspicion when things buzz unexpectedly. Your boots scuff along a stretch of chalky road as you leave behind the hedgerows and veer toward a collection of cottages with roofs like lopsided pastries. You pull your satchel strap tighter, but the leather still slips stubbornly off your shoulder. It's heavier now, somehow, than it was an hour ago, even though you've delivered nearly a dozen items. You suspect the eel jar is multiplying dot at your next stop. You approach a gate that creaks like an old man's knees. The house beyond is modest, with smoke curling lazily from its crooked chimney. You knock gently. No answer. You knock again louder. Still no answer. Then, from somewhere behind the house, a voice calls out, "Leave it by the door. Mind the cat." You glance down. The cat is, in fact, right there. Immense, orange, and sprawled out across the stoop like royalty. You attempt a polite step around it, but the cat flicks its tail and gives you a look that says, "You shall not pass." You place the bundle beside it as gently as possible and retreat before you have to explain a scratched shin to your supervisor. Today's deliveries seem unusually odd in shape. Most are small, tidy letters, yes, but tucked between them are items that stretch the definition of post. One package is wrapped in oilcloth, knotted like a roast, and leaks slightly at one corner. You don't ask. Another is a box so light you worry it might simply contain an offended ghost. This, you realize, is the section of your route known unofficially among postmen as the package problem. Georgian Post wasn't just about correspondence. It was a trusted and occasionally abused courier system for things. All sorts of things. Teapots, spools of lace, wooden dentures, a bundle of goose feathers, a well-wrapped ham. Someone once tried to send a single turnip with a ribbon and no return address. Historians confirm that while letters were the bread and butter of the postal trade, small parcels were increasingly common by the mid-1700s, especially once regional delivery services began connecting smaller towns. This rise in parcels, however, created complications. Weight limits? A suggestion at best size restrictions? Unenforceable. You've seen boxes larger than some children? Packaging standards? Please, you once received a delivery wrapped entirely in old hymn sheets, tied with what you sincerely hope was clean laundry string. And the labels? That's a different problem altogether. One item today is a rectangle wrapped in black cloth, with no label, just a note pinned to it that says for the usual recipient. You know the one. You do not, in fact, know the one. But you write unclear next to it in your ledger and make a mental note to ask the coffeehouse clerk later. If anyone knows who the one is, it's the woman who listens to everyone's gossip and pours the tea. You dig deeper into the satchel and find a long, narrow tube. At first, you think it's a musical instrument. Then you spot the word experimental. You put it down. Far away from your sandwich, there's a parcel addressed to young Master Toby, with decorative sketches of dancing dogs drawn on the edges. Inside, you imagine, is either a book or something alive. Possibly both, but your favorite today is a slim box labeled in careful copperplate script. Caution, crystals. That's all, just crystals. You hold it up and shake it very gently. It doesn't rattle, but it hums ever so faintly, like a choir whispering on a distant hill. You decide it's best delivered quickly and without too much thought. Packages. Unlike letters, present challenges of space and shape. Your satchel bulges at odd angles, corners poking out like elbows at a crowded dinner. You have to reshuffle the load every time you make a delivery, sometimes leaning items against trees. While repacking, other times bribing local children with apples to help tie the flap down. You once received a bundle marked, "Cake do not tilt." It was already tilted, spectacularly. It smelled like cinnamon and disappointment. Another time, a jar of liniment oil shattered halfway through the root and turned half your letters into peppermint scented. Abstract art. One recipient, a poet, claimed it improved the message. His wife disagreed. Strongly. Scholars still debate whether Georgian postmen were compensated for damaged goods. Some say yes, if reported through the proper bureaucratic forms, all 17 of them. Others suggest the risk was simply part of the job, like weather, or wild dogs, or unusually aggressive dairymaids, who insisted you had skipped their cousin's house dot as you press on through the narrowing road, a chicken darts across your path. Not metaphorically an actual chicken, carrying what looks suspiciously like a string of twine in its beak. You step back. The package you're carrying bounces uncomfortably in your bag. You stop beside a mossy milestone and shift the satchel off your shoulder again. There's no escaping it, you need to reorganize. You lay everything out carefully on the flat stone. Letters to the left, parcels to the right. Some packages you can identify by smell alone. One whiffs of lavender, another of old leather and possibly regret. A third releases a sharp scent that makes your eyes water slightly. Onions? Varnish? Both? You do your best to sort by weight, then by destination. You find the tiny gift box for the vicar's wife tucked beneath a wrapped embroidery. Kit, she'd be delighted. You hope. Last time she got a parcel from her cousin, it was filled with marzipan mice and a slightly damp note. With a little shuffling and no small amount of creative folding, you get everything back into the satchel. It's still heavy, still lumpy, but no longer threatening to rupture. Small victories. You sling the bag back over your shoulder. The road stretches onward. A cart creaks in the distance. Someone's dog barks lazily at a passing duck, and a faint breeze stirs the trees overhead. And you, faithful postman, with your mysterious boxes and sweet-smelling packages, trudge onward, because no one else is. Going to deliver a jar of pickled gooseberries labeled urgent. The sky overhead begins to shift into a brighter gray, a hesitant kind of light, as if the sun itself isn't quite sure it wants to commit to this Tuesday. Your boots, now bearing the full crust of the Georgian countryside, sink with an undignified squelch into another puddle just as you round the next corner. You sigh. That's the third one today. Possibly fourth. You've stopped counting. You're one with the mud now. Your next delivery is to a cottage with a crooked chimney and laundry dancing in the breeze bed sheets, mostly, and what you sincerely hope are undergarments of some sort. As you reach into your satchel to retrieve a trio of letters, something catches your eye. A small envelope with delicate handwriting and a note scrawled across the front in faint pencil. P.S. If the postman's passing, could he also bring a bit of thread? Ah, yes. The can you? Also, notes dot this isn't the first one, and it won't be the last. In fact, Georgian postmen often found themselves unofficial errand boys for entire villages. Once people trusted you to carry letters, it wasn't long before they trusted you to carry favors. Thread, lemons, news from down the lane. And once, memorably, a live duck wearing a ribbon. Today's batch is mild by comparison. You scan the rest of the pile. Another envelope reads, "Please remind the apothecary I need more headache powder." A package addressed to a Mr. Thistlethwaite includes a side note. If he's not home, can you ask his neighbor if she's seen his dog? The nerve of it. You pause, smiling despite yourself. These aren't official requests, of course. They're more like suggestions. Gentle pleadings tucked between the folds of proper communication. You imagine someone, quill in hand, wondering whether it's inappropriate to ask the Crown's mail service to also deliver a wedge of cheese. And then doing it anyway. One letter from a Mrs. Godfrey includes an addendum. If the day is warm, please place this in the shade. You hold the note up to the sky, squint at the clouds, and consider how best to carry a shaded letter in a satchel that has, at this point, developed its own microclimate. Historians still argue whether Georgian postmen were expected to fulfill such side tasks. Some journals mention these small favors as part of a gentlemanly code. Others insist they were unspoken, neighborly agreements, polite but unenforceable, like, don't let your cow wander into the bakery. And still, you wonder, was there ever a postal guideline about this? Perhaps buried in a dusty handbook under the heading on carrying sundries and social obligations. You take a break on a stone fence near a lane lined with elms. The wind picks up. The satchel creaks ominously, as if warning you not to lean too far lest it leap off and finish the route without you. As you dig for the next delivery, you come across a hand-sized parcel wrapped in oiled paper and string. Inside, you guess, is a spool of thread or perhaps a tiny ham. It's addressed to Miss Lillian Primrose with no other direction but near the hill with a large rock that looks like a badger. You pause. You've seen that rock. It does, indeed, look like a judgmental badger. Another letter simply says, to be delivered only if the recipient smiles. You squint. Is that your responsibility now? Do you request a grin? Demand it? You mentally rehearse asking someone to smile as a condition for receiving their mail and decide the answer is no. You're underpaid as it is. There's a half-sheet note, folded over and sealed with what appears to be honey. It sticks slightly to your fingers. It reads, "Please deliver this quickly. I suspect he knows I've written." It isn't signed. It smells faintly of violets and anxiety. You place it in the urgent, mysterious, and slightly dramatic section of your satchel. Some of these unofficial notes are more practical than poetic. Requests for eggs. A reminder to bring back a borrowed pie tin. One time someone asked for an eel recipe to be shared between towns. You obliged, though the letter got wet and only eel, boil, and sprigs of something were legible in the end. Georgian Post was many things, but never dull. You often find yourself caught in the web of community stories, half-truths, and quiet errands passed on paper. The post route is as much about listening as delivering. You are the accidental archivist of secrets and soup recipes alike. You pass a cottage with a garden overflowing with hollyhocks. A woman leans out with a hopeful look. "Any word from my son?" she asks. You shake your head gently, and she nods, lips tight, but says nothing. It's the 5th time she's asked this month. You place the letter. You do have an invitation to tea from a friend into her hands anyway. Her face softens. There's a strange kind of magic in these moments. Not flashy, not fireworks. Just quiet, persistent connection. A letter that arrives at the right time. A favor remembered. A piece of thread even. You resume walking. The satchel swings a bit more easily now. Or maybe you're simply numb to its rebellion. In any case, the road stretches on and your mind begins to wander. What would they think? Those people writing their side notes and quiet requests, if they knew how often their words amused or baffled the postman, would they be embarrassed? Or would they smile, knowing someone out there read the phrase, "Please also, if possible, deliver with jam"? Because in the end, your job isn't just about mail. It's about all the little things people ask for along the way, even if you can't always deliver them. The clouds have finally made up their mind. A soft drizzle begins to fall, misting the fields and turning the dirt path into a gently squelching mosaic of footprints, hoof marks, and the occasional cartwheel rut. You tug your collar up and tilt your hat forward, though neither offers much resistance to Georgian rain. Less like a storm and more like the sky itself has started perspiring. You glance down at your satchel. It is, without a doubt, fatter than before. Not from new letters, of course, but from the damp. The rain is beginning to wick into the corners, and the once sturdy flap now hangs like a soggy cravat. This is where you meet your arch nemesis, soggy paper. Georgian correspondence had many enemies time, misdelivery, dramatic squirrels, but moisture was the great equalizer. It didn't matter how poetic your prose or how elegant your calligraphy. One good rainstorm and your letter to Aunt Beatrice turned into a modernist inkblot of confused apologies. You duck under the awning of an old smithy to regroup. The blacksmith nods but says nothing, too occupied with hammering a horseshoe into submission. You open your satchel cautiously. It smells faintly of ink, wet leather, and, is that nutmeg? You shuffle through the contents with fingers that are already beginning to prune. A few of the folded letters are smudged blue ink bleeding into brown paper, making even the sender's name resemble something invented by a sneeze. One letter, unfortunately, was written in water-soluble ink, a fashionable but deeply impractical trend among the more artistic set. You know the type: powdered wigs, scented parchment, dramatic size. This letter now reads something like, "My dearest smear cannot wait, blur eternal devotion ink splot." You're sure the sentiment was romantic. Now it reads like a tragic ghost having a bad day. Historians debate whether postmen were expected to protect the integrity of correspondence at all costs. Some postal manuals advised wrapping letters in extra cloth or wax paper during foul weather. Others gently implied that the risk was the sender's to bear. After all, if you wrote a love confession during a thunderstorm and didn't have the foresight to oil your envelope, whose fault is that really? Still, you do what you can. You shuffle the more delicate envelopes to the driest corner of the satchel, right behind that rigid little package marked "may contain glass, possibly marbles, unsure." As for the rain, you've developed techniques. One involves tilting the satchel at a precise 17-degree angle to allow runoff to pool at one corner. Another involves stuffing less important documents like unpaid bills along the bottom to act as sacrificial padding. It's not ethical, per se, but it is practical. And in this drizzle, you're more post sailor than postman. Letters must float or perish. You remove your notebook, the post house ledger, and scribble a quick note. Light rain by noon. Recommend sealing wax upgrades. Advise printing addresses in whale oil, if legal. The ink runs slightly. You sigh. Your next stop is a cottage with ivy growing up one side like it's trying to make a break for it. You reach into the bag and pull out a letter wrapped in vellum, a thicker, semi-waterproof material made from calfskin. These were common among wealthier correspondents, particularly lawyers, priests, and people who like to pretend they were both. Vellum has its advantages in weather like this. It holds ink well, resists tearing, and smells faintly of antiquity. But it's also stiff, prone to curling, and makes a distinct crackle when handled like a disapproving aunt at a tea party. You hand the letter over and are rewarded with a half smile and a butterscotch. Rain or not, Some deliveries are worth it. As you press on, your thoughts turn to ink and quills, the lifeblood of Georgian correspondence. The tools used to write these letters were themselves temperamental. Ink came in many forms: iron gall, walnut, lampblack. Some were rich and dark, others faded to sepia within weeks. Some had pleasant aromas, others reeked of vinegar and ambition. And if the writer didn't stir the ink properly before dipping their quill, they risked blotches, fading, or what you privately call ink eruptions. Quills, of course, were made from bird feathers, most commonly goose. They had to be sharpened regularly with a penknife, which meant many a letter was interrupted by dramatic pauses and muttered swearing as the tip broke. Mid-sonnet. You imagine the writers of these letters hunched over their desks by candlelight, sighing theatrically, dipping their quills, muttering about smudges and grammar, and trying to remember if affections has one F or two. One particularly memorable envelope from last month arrived with an inkblot so large, the recipient assumed it was part of the family crest. You still aren't sure if that was a happy accident or clever cover-up. You stop under a lopsided tree and shake some of the rain from your coat. It doesn't help. You're wet to the knees and your hat smells like boiled wool. But the bag still carries on bravely, absorbing the rain like a doomed hero in a melodrama. You retrieve the next letter. It's damp but intact. You squint at the writing. It's ornate, looping, and slightly smudged, but legible. To my darling Arabella. Should this letter reach you in one piece, know that my love withstands the storms of this world and the incompetence of royal mail. Charming. You deliver it with extra care. The drizzle eases as you approach the next cottage. A cat sits on a windowsill, judging you. Your coat drips a slow, steady rhythm onto the doorstep as you wait. The recipient opens the door, sniffs, and nods. Post is damp again, I see. You smile. It is the season for atmospheric sabotage, ma'am. She nods solemnly, takes her envelope, and shuts the door. And just like that, you're off again, boots squelching, satchel dripping, but letters still intact. Mostly. You cradle the worst of them gently, like soggy pigeons, whispering quiet. Apologies to the ink-stained ghosts of romance and bookkeeping inside. Because in Georgian England, nothing, not wind, not rain, not the occasional pig can stop the post. The rain has slowed to a mist now, more like walking through a sigh than a storm. The road glistens under your feet, puddles catching dim reflections of the gray sky, and the occasional droplet slides off a branch to land squarely on your head. Like a punctuation mark from nature. You push onward, satchel hugging your side like a damp, surly pet, and begin contemplating the other daily torment in your noble, underpaid profession, fashion. Postman uniforms. Or rather, the lack thereof. You see, in the early Georgian period, there wasn't a fully standardized outfit for postmen, particularly those trudging around the countryside like yourself. Some larger cities had liveried postboys in red waistcoats, and tricorn hats, formal, proper, and often confused for footmen or circus barkers. But in the villages and winding byways, most postmen wore what they could afford, a mix of practicality, inherited coats, and second-hand breeches with a fondness for mud. Your own attire today is a fine example of postman chic. An old woolen coat once. Navy, now closer to dishwater-patched elbows, mismatched buttons, and a collar that perpetually refuses to lie flat. Underneath, a linen shirt that might have been white at some point this decade. Breeches with reinforced knees. Because you've learned the hard way that rural delivery routes often involve crawling under fences. And of course, thick stockings with a hole on the left ankle that's letting in just enough moisture to keep things authentically Georgian. And the boots, the boots. Heavy leather, hobnailed soles, and about as flexible as a moralist in Parliament. You've broken them in, of course, but they still creak ominously whenever you bend too far. Forward. They're also home to a small pebble you can't quite shake out, but which you've named Trevor, and now treat as a reluctant traveling companion. Historians agree that postmen's outfits varied greatly depending on the region, the decade, and the budget of the postal authority overseeing them. The Royal Mail did eventually implement uniform guidelines, bright red jackets, brass buttons, capes for rainy weather, but in the Georgian countryside, such grandeur rarely trickled down. Instead, postmen relied on sturdy coats, wide-brimmed, hats, if they could keep them, and scarves often knitted by concerned aunts. You recall a fellow postman, Alfie, who once arrived at the sorting house looking like a scarecrow impersonating a vicar. He claimed his entire outfit had been made from retired upholstery and swore the knee patches were regal. No one dared disagree. The patches had TASSELS dot as for headwear. Your own hat is a battered tricorn that flaps slightly in strong winds and has a mysterious stain on one side you've decided not to investigate. It's more symbolic than functional now, but you keep it out of habit and because birds seem less inclined to aim for you when you wear it. The satchel, of course, is your most important accessory, made of leather so aged it creaks like floorboards in a haunted inn. It has been patched with everything from canvas to once a square of barkcloth when nothing else was handy. The brass buckle no longer lines up properly, so you tie the flap shut with twine. It gives you a resourceful air. Or so you tell yourself. You stop at a hedge-lined house with an ornamental gate. A lace curtain twitches as you approach. You retrieve a small sealed note and slip it through the slot in. The door. No one answers, but you're fairly certain someone's watching from the parlor, possibly with a spyglass dot as you turn to leave. Your coat snags on the gate. Again. The left pocket tears slightly, revealing part of your emergency handkerchief. And the top of your treasured snuff box dot. Ah, yes. The personal effects. It's an unspoken rule among postmen. You may carry the letters of hundreds, but you're still entitled to carry a few of your own small comforts. Your snuff box, battered tin and all, is one such treasure, filled with finely ground tobacco. It provides both relief and distraction on longer routes. You tap a bit onto the back of your hand and sniff gently, just enough to clear the fog, not enough to sneeze your soul out. The burn is warm, familiar. You wipe your sleeve. Carry-on dot in your other pocket. A wedge of cheese wrapped in cloth. Hard, crumbly, slightly suspect. Technically too old for the gentry, but perfect for you. The cheese isn't just nourishment, it's a strategy, a bribe for unruly dogs, a makeshift doorstop. Once, it was a paperweight during an unexpectedly windy pause. And don't forget the string. Every postman worth his ink carries at least a foot of string. You've used it to tie parcels, patch trousers, secure a wagon wheel, briefly. And one memorable time, hold up your britches when a button gave way during an unfortunately public delivery. Some days you carry chalk for writing notes on gates. Other times, a small bit of wax in case you need to reseal a letter that's come unstuck. You once carried a dried sprig of lavender, mostly because it made your bag smell less like ... postman ... You reached the next house. A grand affair with a gravel path and a mailbox so ornate it probably has opinions. The butler opens the door with a sniff. Delivery, you say. He nods, doesn't speak. You hand over 3 letters, 1 official, 1 folded poem, and 1 likely scandalous. He shuts the door. You suspect he reads every letter before handing them off. You also suspect he's the poet. Back on the road, your coat flaps in the breeze, and your hat sags slightly to the left. You straighten it, sort of, and trudge onward. You may not be in livery. You may not cut a fine figure. But you are, undeniably, the postman. And even if your scarf's unraveling and your boots smell like damp regret, you carry letters with purpose and string with pride. The road ahead veers gently uphill now, past a field where sheep chew with the blank intensity of philosophers, and the occasional goat looks like it's planning something. The mist is lifting, revealing distant hedgerows and chimney stacks, and there, nestled among them, your next delivery point, the old mill. But before you set off, you check your satchel once more, tugging it around to your front with a grunt. That twinge in your shoulder? That's not just from letters. That's from the odd and oddly personal collection of Postmen, pocket clutter you've gathered. Because here's the thing about Georgian postmen. For all the letters and parcels and official wax seals, they were human too. They needed the little things to get through long, damp, occasionally goat-blocked days. And more often than not, their pockets were as curious as their deliveries. First up today, the snuff box, naturally. You already used it once, but you give it another look. The lid is dented, the tin is scuffed, but the contents are dry. Barely. There's something comforting about the ritual of it. A little pinch, a little sniff, a little nod to the absurdity of the Georgian postal route. You tuck it back into your coat pocket like it's a trusted friend. Next, a chunk of hard cheese. Still wrapped in a bit of linen, its edge is now a little waxy, a little crumbly. You tap it thoughtfully. Still good. Probably. It's your emergency cheese backup. Snack, a decoy for dogs, and once, embarrassingly, your only birthday meal. You also carry an apple. Or, more accurately, the core of what was an apple, now halfway to becoming a science experiment. You consider tossing it into the hedgerow, then decide to keep it a while longer out of sentiment. It was a particularly good apple. Then there's the twine. Twine, the postman's savior. Your current coil is wrapped neatly and secured with a brass pin. It's been used to reseal letters, tie unruly parcels, and once to reattach the handle of a widow's teapot. Not all heroes wear capes. Some carry twine. You pause at the crest of the hill and take a moment to adjust your boots. Inside your sock, you find something unexpected. A coin. A halfpenny, warm from your steps, likely slipped in there earlier during one of your endless rummages. You inspect it, then flick it in the air and catch it. Good luck, perhaps? Or at least good. Enough. Now, not every postman carries what you do. You once met a London courier who kept a mirror shard, a ribbon, and what he claimed was the Queen's discarded glove. You doubted him, but the glove did smell faintly of lavender and judgment. Some men carry small books of poetry. Others, sketches from children along the route. You, for a while, carried a letter never delivered meant for a woman who had long since moved away. It was folded and unfolded so many times it became a kind of talisman, a reminder of how much people placed in your hands. You finally gave it to her brother years later. He smiled and said, "She'd have laughed at that." Some carry flasks. You do not. Not since the incident with the bishop's letter. But that's another story. What you do have, however, tucked into the inner lining of your coat is a tiny notebook. Not official, not sanctioned, just for you. Inside, notes on who lives where, which dogs bite, which children like riddles, and who insists on being addressed as your ladyship despite living next to a turnip field. You keep sketches, too, of odd-shaped postmarks, of fences you've tripped over, of a squirrel you swear saluted you once. You turn the page and read yesterday's note. Cottage with 3 chimneys likes licorice. Avoid well. Bee situation. Ongoing. Right. Must check if the bees have calmed down. The old mill comes into view, its sails creaking lazily in the breeze. You step around a puddle that could qualify as a minor lake and approach the door. The miller opens it before you knock. He's barefoot, flour-dusted, and holding a sack of oats like it's a child. Got something for me? He asks. You dig. In the satchel. There it is, a letter from his brother, wrapped in cloth, sealed with a blob of brown wax and a single, slightly squashed oat embedded in it. The miller chuckles when he sees it. That's him. All right. You exchange a few pleasantries and one suspiciously warm oatcake, then carry on down the lane. As you walk, your mind drifts. You wonder how many small items your fellow postmen carry, how many secrets lie in their coat linings and patched pockets. You once heard of a postman in Devon who carried a baby sparrow for a week after rescuing it from a drainpipe, fed it crumbs and called it postage. It flew away eventually, and he claimed it still followed him on sunny days. You pat your own coat affectionately, making sure the cheese wedge hasn't migrated too close to your notebook. A balance must be maintained. And then there's the envelope. Feel it there, near the bottom of the satchel. Heavier than most, hand-addressed in exquisite script. You know it well. It's from Lady Morrigan, the Countess who insists you deliver her letters by hand with discretion and never on a Tuesday. Fortunately, it's Wednesday. You pull it out, study the seal, a golden fox, and nod. Another day, another bit of intrigue wrapped in ribbon and entitlement. You slip it into your side pouch, away from the snuff and the apple core. Priorities. The trees ahead part, revealing another lane, another gate, another hopeful face behind a window. Your boots are wet, your back aches, and your satchel still. Weighs more than a mildly stubborn sheep. But your pockets? Your pockets are full. Of stories. Of crumbs. Of twine and cheese and memories. And somehow, that makes the miles easier. You leave the old mill behind, oatcake crumbs trailing from your sleeve, and trudge back toward the crossroads where the main route widens. Just ahead, resting under the lazy gaze of a leafless elm tree, stands the towering red coach with its lacquered trim and leather straps, one of His Majesty's Royal Mail coaches, already snorting and huffing as its horses stamp their hooves with aristocratic impatience. Mail coaches are a sight to behold. Heavy wooden frames, oversized lanterns on each side, and a royal crest painted so proudly it seems to glare at you if you dare spill ink on a government notice. They're pulled by a team of 4 horses, 2 noble bays, 1 anxious gray, and one that seems perpetually annoyed to be employed. The coachman sits up top, bundled in layers of wool and fur, holding the reins with theatrical flair. He nods as you approach but doesn't speak. You nod back. This is not rudeness, it's the sacred language of postal men. The nod means, yes, the mail is late, but so am I. And it's probably raining somewhere, so let's not pretend we control any of this. You swing your satchel off your shoulder with a grunt and hoist it to the open compartment on the side of the coach. A second postman inside reaches out, a wiry fellow named George, whose glasses are perpetually fogged. Together, you begin the handoff. Anything cracked, oozing, or humming today? George asks, his voice muffled by a scarf that's trying to strangle him. Just the usual, you reply. A letter that smells like pine tar, a bundle of unpaid bills from someone who definitely owns too many cats, and a small box labeled "Contains future regret." He chuckles and slots the letters into their assigned cubbies. Each route has its own pouch, its own label, its own chaos. The system works barely held together by habit, string, and the quiet resignation of overworked clerks. Historians often point to the Georgian mail coach system as one of the crown jewels of 18th century logistics. Fast by contemporary standards. Armored, sometimes, and more punctual than Parliament, these coaches revolutionized postal delivery across the kingdom. They cut delivery times in half and terrified highwaymen with their armed guards and no-nonsense speed. Still, no system is perfect. You remember the story of the coach that lost a wheel near York and delivered every letter 3 days late, but also somehow in rhyme. Or the time a coach hit a pothole so deep it was rumored to be the entrance to Hades. The passengers denied it, but you've seen the sketches. Very convincing. You step back from the coach to check your side satchel. You've kept the local deliveries separate village-to-village notes, hand-carried secrets, and one urgent request for a jar of goose grease. Not everything needs to travel by coach. Some items are too delicate or too juicy. You pull out a saddlebag, old, cracked leather that smells like hay and resignation, and pass it to the coachman. Inside are longer-distance letters, some bound for London, others for Bath. One scrawled in green ink and addressed simply to the man who knows about the pigeons. You really hope that one finds him. As the coach creaks and groans into motion. A flurry of hooves and flicking tails. You step back to avoid being splashed by a particularly eager puddle. The wheel misses you. Barely. Your left boot now smells of historic mud and something vaguely fishy. Possibly eel-related. Again. Turn and begin walking. Mail coaches may carry the weight of empires, but you? You carry the weight of whispered gossip, gentle reminders, and overdue apologies all tucked into that satchel of yours. Now slightly emptier, slightly lighter, though still with the stiffness of damp leather that remembers every mile. You pass. A young boy on the road barefoot, trousers too short, face smudged with soot and enthusiasm. He calls out, "Did the coach bring any news from Bristol?" You shake your head. "Not today, lad." He nods solemnly, as if that answers something important, and goes back to poking a stick at an anthill. Children are philosophers. 2. Further up the road. You stop at a stone bench placed, legend says, by a postman who once refused to carry another bundle until someone built him a place to sit. You rest there now, back against the cool stone, listening to the clatter of the coach fading into the distance. A pair of robins land on a nearby post. One hops closer, curious about your cheese. You break off a corner and drop it nearby. The robin stares, offended. Apparently this robin had expected crumbs of a higher pedigree. You sit in the stillness, letting your body catch up with itself. The coach is gone. The route continues. But for a moment, there's only you, the creak of trees, and the whisper of unopened letters shifting inside your bag. You think of all the things these coaches carry. Treaties, invoices, love, threats, recipes. One time, a poem that made a widow laugh for the first time in 3 years. Historians debate whether postmen truly understood the weight of what they carried. Some say it was just a job. Others believe they were the unspoken heart of the nation, connecting towns, bridging silence, ferrying souls one sealed letter at a time. You look down at your hands, ink-stained, calloused, still holding a note marked, "Deliver only if raining." You smile, because of course it's raining. You leave the coach stop behind with mud clinging to your heels and a slight ache in your left shoulder that has settled in like an unwanted house guest. The bag is lighter, true, but not light. Never light. And besides, now comes the tricky part. The letters you have to hand deliver, one by one, to people who may or may not want them. You head down a narrow footpath bordered by hawthorn and nettles, your steps softened by moss. The smell of wood smoke and baking lard wafts over from a nearby cottage. You check your next delivery. A short stack of letters, all addressed in the same familiar hand, all destined for the same household. You sigh, it's the Wickertons again. Been delivering love letters to this family for months. Not between lovers, but through the family. One goes to the daughter, Arabella. One to the son, Charles. And in a twist that would make a playwright blush, the final one always goes to their father from a woman who signs only as the Peacock. You don't read the letters, not directly. But when the paper is thin and the ink is bold and the candlelight hits it just right, well, Sometimes it's hard not to know that Arabella's suitor calls her my drowsy moonbeam. A bit much, honestly, but perhaps romance was more flowery before central heating. You knock on the Wickerton's door. Arabella opens it, cheeks pink from either exertion or embarrassment. She takes her letter with a shy glance, murmuring a thank you. Moments later, Charles emerges around the corner, covered in sawdust, hands outstretched. Mine too? He asks, already grinning. You hand it over, resisting the urge to quote the part you glimpsed about wrestling with philosophy like a handsome Socrates. That one made you choke on your biscuit when you saw it last week. Finally, the father appears stoic, bushy-browed, and suspicious by default. You pass him the peacock letter. His eyebrow twitches. He tucks it into his coat without a word. You nod, tip your hat, and continue. Delivering love letters is one of your trickier responsibilities. Some come scented, some come with pressed flowers. One time, someone glued on a small lock of hair. You nearly dropped it into a goose pond, not out of malice. Just instinct. Historians note that the Georgian period was a time of deep emotional expression through the written word. Courtship was often conducted entirely by mail. And while some letters contain swooning prose and delicate sketches of doves, others, well, let's just say there were subtler ways to propose an elopement involving a ladder, 3 pounds of cheese, and a fast horse. You recall the time. You were handed 2 letters by the same sender, going to 2 different sweethearts on the same street. You paused for a solid minute before delivering either, silently begging the fates not to schedule a dramatic confrontation under your watch. And then there were the heartbreak letters, like the one from Miss Delia Penrose to a Mr. Ambrose Firth, which simply read, "Please stop." That was it. No seal, no flourish, just those 2 words in neat, slightly trembling script. You'd been carrying their back and forth for nearly a year, watching their letters go from "my dearest" to "my unfortunate" to that final 2-word farewell. You didn't see Mr. Firth again after that, but Delia? She sent a letter the following month. To someone new. Love comes and goes, but the post never stops. You arrive now at a cluster of small houses where the doors are always ajar and the neighbors always watching. It's a curious truth that people are often excited to receive letters, even if they don't know from whom. Sometimes especially then. The mystery, the thrill, the delicious speculation. A letter could contain anything. A proposal, a recipe. An inheritance, a scandal. Or an invitation to a dinner party you suspect is just a cover for polite gossip. You knock on another door. An older woman answers, wiping flour from her hands onto her apron. You hand her the envelope with the blue wax seal. She squints at it, then gasps, "Oh, my cousin Henrietta wrote me back." She opens it right there, reading aloud without shame or hesitation. "Dearest Eleanor, yes, the goose was undercooked, and no, I don't believe Gertrude's story about the lace." She cackles. "I knew it. That woman couldn't sew us straight. Line if her bonnet depended on it." She disappears back inside, muttering triumphantly. You love moments like these. The small triumphs. The brief connections. The way a single sheet of paper can change someone's whole afternoon. And yet, there are letters you dread, like the one you carry now. A small envelope sealed in black wax. No perfume. No embellishment. Just a name. Mr. Reardon. You find him sitting near the pump, cap in hand, staring at nothing. You hand him the letter. He nods once, thanks you quietly, and doesn't open it. You walk away without asking. Some messages don't need witnesses. The road turns again, leading you past a row of homes built so closely together you can hear the clatter of forks from inside. You pause in front of the Miller sisters' cottage. They always write to each other, even though they live in the same house. You suspect it's a game now, or perhaps a performance. You deliver today's envelope. and one of them leans out the window. Tell her I'll write back tomorrow. I've got a headache today. You tip your hat. I'll make a note. Sometimes you feel less like a postman and more like an emotional middleman. A courier of longings and grievances and petty wars wrapped in parchment. But that's part of the job, because the mail isn't just bills and announcements. It's also the echo of someone's voice, written in ink and sealed in wax. It's affection, drama, confession, and yes, occasionally bad poetry involving swans and moonlight. You sling the satchel higher on your shoulder, feeling the lump of one last note pressed between two parcels. You hope it's not another hair. You veer off the main road again, where the homes get farther apart and the path narrows to something between a trail and a suggestion. This is the part of the route marked in your notebook with a generous underline and the phrase, "Watch for." Geese. You see, rural mail delivery isn't just a longer walk, it's a battlefield. There's a different energy out here. Gone are the manicured hedges and tidy rows of brick cottages. Now it's mossy fences, lopsided barns, and yards that appear to double as goat communes. And the animals? They're organized. You approach a weather-worn gate and are immediately greeted by the distinct honk-honk-honk of a sentry unit of geese. 6 of them, white and furious, forming a semicircle like an angry, feathery phalanx. They stare you down, heads bobbing in rhythm, daring you to make the first move. You attempt your usual approach, calm voice, slow steps, no eye contact. It works on most dogs. It has never worked on geese. They lunge, wings flapping like a linen. Closet in revolt. You sidestep, raise your satchel like a shield, and dart toward the porch. Victory is narrowly achieved, but not without consequences. One goose nips your boot, leaving behind a muddy badge of honor. Trevor, the pebble inside, shifts in protest. You rap on the door, panting. A farmer's wife opens it, squinting through her spectacles. "Oh, it's you," she says with a chuckle, wiping her hands on her apron. "Made it past the lads, I see." You hand over the parcel something small and round, possibly jam, possibly soap. You don't ask. She thanks you, slips you a boiled. Sweet, and then offers a bottle labeled goose repellent. It smells like vinegar and defeat. Historians rarely write about this part of postal life. The livestock, the long miles, the ankle-deep mud that threatens to steal your boots one soggy step at a time. But, in truth, rural deliveries were some of the hardest and most memorable parts of a postman's day. There's the house with the cow who blocks the gate, staring blankly, chewing slowly, as though considering whether to charge or simply judge. The cottage whose gate latch is so rusted it requires a prayer and a sturdy elbow to open. The steep hill where every rain turns the path into a pudding of clay and regret. You know them all. You have the scars and laundry stains to prove it. You round a bend and come to a hamlet, so small it barely qualifies as a place. 3 homes, a pigsty, and a communal well that's more gossip hub than water source. You knock on the first door. No answer. You try the second. A little girl peeks out, eyes wide. You hand her the letter and she beams, clutching it like treasure. It's from my cousin in Portsmouth. She says, skipping off, "You hope it's good news." Or at least better than last time when the cousin mailed a drawing of a potato and called it a portrait. Next stop, the farm with the suspicious sheepdog. You know this dog well. You've named him Sir Growl Salad, and he greets you with all the warmth of a tax collector. You keep a spare bit of cheese in your pocket for just this encounter. You toss it. He sniffs it, eats it, and still growls. You consider it a tie. You manage to slip the letter through the gate slats and retreat without incident. This, too, is a victory. Rural delivery requires a different kind of patience. Distances are longer, roads less maintained, and residents? Let's say they operate on their own clocks. You once arrived at a cottage to find the entire family asleep at noon. A note pinned to the door read, "Deliver quietly. We're resting from cider." You pause at a bridge, really just a plank over a stream, and admire the view for a moment. Dragonflies skim the surface, and somewhere nearby, a cow moos in what sounds like mild disapproval. You check your satchel. Only 3 letters remain. For this stretch, a bill, a birthday card, and a note addressed to the woman with the green door and the handsome rooster. You remember the place. The rooster is indeed stunning. It wears its feathers like a general wears epaulets, strutting along the fence like it owns the whole county. You find the green door, knock. No one answers, but the rooster meets your eye. You nod respectfully. It nods back. The moment passes. You place the letter gently on the step, weighed down with a stone. The rooster guards it like a feathery sentinel dot as you head back toward the main road. You spot a child sitting under a tree, holding a small envelope like it contains the secrets of the universe. He waves. You wave back. He shouts, "It smells like cinnamon." You smile. That one was from a bakery apprentice to his sweetheart. Smelled like cinnamon and maybe a touch of desperation. You reach the fork in the road where rural turns back to town. You pause, adjusting your satchel. It's lighter again. The worst of the mud is behind you, and your boots, bless them, are still mostly intact. And even though you're soaked, scratched, and possibly infected with goose rage, there's a piece to this part of the job. Out here, the letters feel more alive. They travel longer, wait longer. Mean more dot because when a postman walks 6 miles through mud, hail, and poultry combat just to deliver a folded piece of paper, you can be sure someone will read it carefully, maybe even twice. You return to the village proper with your boots making soft squelching sounds on the damp stones and the comforting weight of a half-empty satchel tugging gently at your shoulder. The mist has thinned, replaced by that golden haze of late afternoon when the air is warm but still smells like wet laundry and boiled cabbage from 3 houses down. You're heading for the beating heart of the Georgian Information Network, not the post office. Not the gentry's drawing room, but the coffee house dot in towns both large and small. The coffee house serves as a strange hybrid between mailroom, newsroom, library, and performance hall. It's where letters are collected, sorted, and gossiped about long before they ever reach their official destinations. You step inside and are instantly hit with a swirl of aromas burnt coffee, old ink, wet wool, and the faintest note of cinnamon someone keeps sneaking into their cup like it's a secret ingredient. Dot at a corner table sits Agnes, the sorting clerk and unofficial master of village logistics. She wears a shawl that looks like it was knitted from sarcasm and twine, and she sorts through envelopes with the efficiency of a magician and the judgment of a librarian who remembers everything you've ever borrowed. Late again, she says without looking up. By exactly 2 minutes, you reply. That's still late, she says, and flicks a letter into the North Road pile with dramatic flair. You shrug off your coat, hang it by the door where it immediately begins dripping, and bring your satchel to the sorting table. Agnes opens it and peers inside like a fortune teller inspecting tea leaves. I smell jam. And remorse, she murmurs. You begin unloading the contents local letters first, then those for pickup. A few have already been pre-sorted by handwriting. The mayor's loopy scrawl, the apothecary's precise italic, the anonymous notes written in charcoal on ledger scraps that may or may not be veiled threats. The coffee house, like many in Georgian England, doubles as a postal exchange. People come here to leave outgoing letters, retrieve incoming ones, and more often than not, discuss their contents with anyone within earshot. The tables are crowded with pamphlets, discarded envelopes, and patrons pretending not to eavesdrop while openly tilting their heads in your direction. There's the vicar, sipping his coffee with exaggerated calm, even as he reads a letter marked "Private eyes only." There's Miss Tyndall, who runs the milliner's shop, trying to decipher a note from her sister who refuses to use punctuation. And in the corner, old Mr. Plimpton, a man who hasn't received a letter since 1792, but insists on checking every Tuesday and Thursday just in case Napoleon writes. You begin the task of sorting with Agnes. Incoming to the left, outgoing to the right, and the truly baffling in a pile all their own. You pause over one letter sealed with what looks suspiciously like sealing cheese. Agnes gives you a look. You shrug. It was soft when I got it. One packet catches your eye, a thick envelope tied with ribbon and labeled "Do not open without." Biscuits. You set it aside for the innkeeper, who always receives eccentric instructions with his mail and has, in the past, been asked to sing the envelope open. Agnes eyes a sealed note. This one's from the solicitor. I can tell? By the way it frowns at me. Shall we guess what it's about? You ask, property or scandal? Possibly both. Those are usually my favorite kind. In the background, a conversation rises near the fireplace. I heard Margaret's cousin in Bristol eloped with a baker, says one woman, clearly louder than necessary. Oh, I heard it was a butcher, her companion corrects. The letter had a grease stain. Proof. You smile. The truth may never be known, but the letter did, in fact, smell faintly of lard. Coffee houses are peculiar beasts. Technically, for caffeine and conversation, they've become centers of communication, rivaled only by churches and market stalls. And if you listen carefully, they hum with more than idle chatter. They hum with news. Today's whispers include a carriage accident, a missing chicken, a new pamphlet claiming that sugar leads to moral collapse, and the shocking discovery that Mr. Fenwick of number 9 wears rouge. He does not. That's just his face. Historians note that in the Georgian era, coffee houses played an essential role in both the distribution and interpretation of news. Here, you don't just deliver a letter. You interpret it, translate it, sometimes rewrite it entirely if the handwriting is bad enough. And you never know who's watching. There could be a gentleman from London, scribbling your overheard words into a play before dessert. Agnes finishes binding a bundle of outgoing mail and hands it to you. Northbound, but don't leave it. In the cart again. The wheel spokes are still sticky from that honey jar incident. That was once. And it was sealed. Mostly. You sip from a chipped mug someone's left for you, lukewarm coffee, strong enough to wake a magistrate. You stare into it like it holds secrets. Maybe it does. This coffee house is full of them. A man you don't recognize steps inside, rain, dripping from his hat. He glances around, spots you, and hands over a folded letter without a word. No return address, no seal, just your name. You raise an eyebrow, but he's already gone. Agnes leans in. You are going to open that, right? Only if it insults me directly, you say, and tuck it into your coat. As the fire crackles and voices buzz, you gather the last few letters, tuck them into your side pouch, and stretch your legs. It's nearly dusk and the final deliveries. Still wait. A few are for villagers who refuse to come to the coffee house. Others are marked urgent, which in postal terms usually means delivered before next Tuesday. You thank Agnes, who hands you a plum bun for the road, and steps back to sort yet another handful of envelopes with the efficiency of a spinning wheel. And with that, you step out into the fading light, bag lighter, stomach slightly heavier. And the warm sense that even if letters travel alone, they arrive in the middle of a conversation already underway. Because in a Georgian village, everyone reads between the lines. The light has turned the color of cooled tea as you step back into the dusky street. Candles flicker in windows now, casting soft glows on the cobblestones. And somewhere in the distance, a fiddle is being tuned for reasons that are either joyful or deeply unfortunate. You shoulder your satchel again and feel it catch slightly. The flap is sticking to something inside. Probably that envelope sealed with too much wax. Or jam. It's always one or the other. You glance down at your delivery list and groan softly. Postal inspectors. It's time for your favorite task. Appeasing the realm's most feared breed of bureaucrats, those who do not deliver the mail, but instead judge it, log it, inspect it, and occasionally sniff it suspiciously. You make your way toward a modest building tucked between a chapel and a bakery, with a sign that reads Royal Post Oversight Office in letters so faded they seem ashamed of themselves. Inside, it smells like mildew, ink, and disappointment. The inspector on duty today is Mr. Pribble, a man whose mustache appears to have ambitions of its own. He peers at you over the rim of his teacup. "You're late," he says, "though you're technically 10 minutes early." "You're early," you reply with a smile. He does not smile back. You set the bundle of letters marked for record keeping on his desk. They're copies of notices, duplicates of merchant invoices, and the occasional mystery envelope marked "Open under candlelight only." Mr. Pribble begins leafing through them with surgical intensity. Historians still debate whether postal inspectors were agents of order or chaos. Their official role was to ensure the integrity of the system letters delivered unmolested, routes followed, rates recorded. Their unofficial role? Well, let's just say some were known to be curious. "Do you smell vinegar?" Mr. Pribble asks, lifting one letter to his nose. That might be the one from Mrs. Cotterill. She's mailing her pickling recipe to her niece. She enclosed an entire onion. "Yes, sir." He sets it aside with a sigh that suggests he has seen worsen. He has. Last winter someone mailed a preserved eel without a jar. It haunts the office to this day. You glance at the shelf behind him. There's a glass case labeled "Contraband." Inside, one pair of used stockings, mailed twice, a pinnacle addressed to Parliament, and a note that simply reads, "Don't trust the parrot." No further context. Still, despite their reputation, postal inspectors like Mr. Pribble serve a purpose. They track patterns. Watch for forgeries. Note when the same handwriting appears on letters addressed to 3 different wives. They're the keepers of postal law, and if not exactly beloved, they are deeply feared by those who try to game the system. "I see one of your letters is unstamped," Mr. Pribble mutters, frowning. "It's paid at the point of receipt," you reply. Miss Trenton always insists on handling the cost herself. Says it makes the news feel fresher. He grunts in a way that could mean approval or digestive distress. Some inspectors do more than check postage. They open letters legally, of course, especially if marked for royal scrutiny. These include missives suspected of containing sedition, fraud, or poetry of questionable merit. You once watched Mr. Pribble read 3 pages of sonnets aloud just to determine if they were dangerous. He pronounced them moderately maudlin and a minor threat to good taste. There's a reason some people seal their letters with it. Wax, ribbon, string, and if they're truly paranoid, a prayer. Some even go so far as to write in cipher. Georgian ciphers could be elaborate. Symbols, inverted letters, false addresses. One famous example came in last month, an entire letter, written backward. It took Agnes 3 hours to decode, and the result was a shopping list and a limerick. You're handed a form now, a simple slip requiring your initials, signature, and soul. You fill it out, hand it back, and wait as Mr. Pribble stamps it with the official seal, a lion holding a quill in its mouth. You're not sure what it's meant to symbolize. You suspect the lion is just tired. You collect your receipt essential in case someone 3 towns over claims. Their parcel of tin buttons never arrived and begin backing toward the door. "One moment," says Mr. Pribble, holding up a small square of folded parchment. "This one was opened in error. Reseal it and deliver. You take it carefully." The wax is clearly broken and replaced with a blob of brownish glue that smells like burnt sugar. You'll deliver it with a gentle smile and a silent apology. Outside, the wind has picked up. A few leaves tumble past, and you pull your scarf a little tighter. The street lamp outside the oversight office sputters into life, dim, flickering, but determined. You walk a few steps, then pause to examine the reopened letter. It's addressed to the widow Marling behind the fishmonger's stall, side entrance. You know her well. She appreciates the letter. She may also notice the glue and ask questions. You're ready to deflect with your most diplomatic phrase. "Oh, what a curious thing the mail is." You resume your deliveries. You pass a row of houses with warm windows. The sound of spoons clinking in bowls, chairs dragging across stone floors. The village is settling in. But your work isn't done. You carry with you more than letters. You carry tiny dramas, mysterious glue, and the quiet knowledge that somewhere, someone might be waiting for the words you're about to hand them, even if those words have been pre-approved by a man with a suspicious mustache and no discernible hobbies. And as you turn the corner, satchel swinging gently, you feel the faintest shift of weight. The glue has hardened. The letter, like all of them, is ready to be delivered, secrets and all. You're heading back down the south lane now, the village tapering off into open fields and cottages tucked into sleepy hollows. The clouds above are pinking ever so slightly, just a whisper of dusk beginning to settle. You've got a few more stops before your round is done, and by now the satchel on your shoulder has become more companion than burden. Groaning gently as you shift its weight, the leather still faintly damp from earlier rain. You give it a comforting pat, and it thuds in reply. Loudly. "Ah, yes, that noise can only mean one thing. Coins." You sigh and reach in, hand brushing past crinkled letters and stiff parchment until your fingers close around a soft pouch tied with waxed string. It jingles. Of course it jingles. The postal pay pouch, everyone's favorite awkward responsibility. You pull it out and squint at the attached tag. Mrs. O'Mira Toffs, settlement of accounts, piglet boarding and associated oat costs. Piglets. Again, Georgian postmen are not merely couriers of mail and marginal romance. Sometimes they're mobile treasurers. Or, at least, that's how it feels when you're carrying 10 to 15 different pouches of coin, each rattling with a judgmental weight, each tied shut by someone who thinks twine is a form of art. Historians note that during the Georgian era, certain categories of mail included remittances payments sent between distant families, business partners, or, on occasion, estranged siblings who are deeply passive-aggressive about dowries. These coins didn't travel by coach when the destination was just a few miles away. That job fell to you, which means, of course, your satchel becomes not only a repository of gossip and pickled eel letters, but also a clanking, jangling vault of minor economies. The coins themselves are never consistent. There's the ever-reliable penny, the halfpenny, which is lighter but seems to multiply on its own. And then there's the farthing, so small it's essentially a suggestion rather than a form of payment. You once received a bundle of 8 farthings wrapped in lace, with a note, "For your trouble." You used it to buy a single boiled sweet and had 3 farthings left over. One purse today contains a mix of silver and copper coins, plus a single foreign token that you suspect is either Spanish or fake. The attached letter says, "If the blacksmith won't take it, tell him it's for good luck." Another bag, poorly tied, leaks a small stack of shillings into your satchel's inner lining. You stop under a lamppost and fish them out with one finger, wincing at the familiar sound of money vanishing between buckles. You find 5. There were 6. The 6th is claimed by the Satchel, never to be seen again. You arrive at Mrs. Toff's door and knock twice. She opens it wearing a shawl that looks like it used to be a curtain and gives you a smile so wide it nearly escapes her face. "Oh good, my oats money," she chirps, reaching for the pouch. You hand it over carefully. She rattles it, then nods. Feels right. You're not sure what that means, but you nod too. She disappears inside without so much as a thank you. You wait a moment. Then she reappears, pressing something wrapped in wax paper into your hand. For you? You unwrap. Good later. It's a fig. Dried, possibly from last year. A little crunchy. Possibly haunted. You tuck it into your coat pocket next to your emergency cheese and coin tally notebook. That notebook has become essential. Inside, columns carefully drawn in pencil. Coin amount, destination, status, notes. Note section is where the real story lives. Entries like 3 shillings, Mrs. Coggins, delivered but suspicious felt too light. 1 crown for apothecary, refused, said it smelled like lamp oil. 2 pence, child insisted on payment for opening gate, paid. Gate was jammed. You pass a small cottage where the gate has been stuck open for months. Inside lives old Henry, a man who once paid you in turnips. Today's note for him reads, payment enclosed, partial. The envelope is bulging with coins, mostly coppers, and at least one with a hole drilled through the center. You deliver it and hear a delighted cackle from inside. He's already sorting them into jars labeled soup fund, church whispering. And shoes, the return. Loose change, it turns out, is both a blessing and a hazard. You've delivered purses tied shut with hair ribbon. Others wrapped in oilskin. Some arrive sewn into the linings of letters like tiny metal parasites. One came in a hollowed-out lemon. You don't talk about that one. It smelled like treason. You remember the story of a postman in Sussex who tripped and scattered coins down a drain. The town spent 3 days fishing them out with spoons and determination. To this day, locals claim to hear pennies clinking under the cobblestones. You pass a hedgerow and pause to retrieve a final coin pouch, this one heading to the school teacher, Miss Everly. Her students chip in halfpennies to pay her, bundled with hand-drawn notes and occasional feathers. You add a feather to your coat pocket. For balance. By now, your satchel is almost quiet. The coins have been handed over. The pouches have been untied, passed on, and thanked sometimes with figs, sometimes with tea, once with a handwritten recipe for sneeze cordial, made entirely of horseradish and mystery. Your notebook has 3 new entries. All funds delivered. 2 fig exchanges. 1 insulted goat, not your fault. 1 farthing went missing. Suspect satchel again. Possible counterfeit coin with owl on it. Looks at you funny. You make a final mark, snap the book shut, and slide it into your coat. A breeze rustles the hedges. The street lamps flicker on, one by one. In your satchel, only letters remain, now silent, soft, well-traveled. But no more coins. The village is quieter now. Only the evening sounds remain. Shutters closing, spoons clinking, a door creaking shut. The smell of stew hangs in the air. You continue on. And for the first time all day, your bag does not jingle. The last sliver of daylight is melting behind the hills, and the cobblestones beneath your boots feel colder with each step. The shadows are longer now, stretching from fences and stoops like sleepy cats, and your breath comes in little clouds that trail behind you like invisible letters lost to the wind. You reach the edge of the village green, where a single lantern flickers outside the old tailor's shop. The air smells of smoke and damp wool, and the world has that hush it gets just before the fire is lit and the shutters drawn tight for the night. And that's when you spot him. Thomas, the postboy apprentice. He's sitting cross-legged on a stone bench with your spare satchel at his side, hands red from the cold, hair poking out under a cap that's slightly too large. He sees you and perks up, eyes wide with that mix of pride and fear unique to first-week apprentices. "You're late," he says. "You're early," you reply. He grins. You sit beside him and accept the warm cloth-wrapped something he holds out, a heel of bread, still soft. You bite in. Raisin. A luxury. Thomas has been shadowing you for 5 days now. That's enough time to learn 3 truths of the trade. Dogs are unpredictable. Wax seals don't stick in sleet. Everyone lies about how heavy their packages are. Tonight, he's got his own satchel. Lighter than yours, but still sagging with its load of second-tier deliveries, household newsletters, subscription, pamphlets, and the all-important friendly letters from neighbors who refuse to speak in person. You let him talk. He's buzzing with observations. I met the butcher's wife. She says her brother writes like a pig. Mr. Fenwick gave me a toffee and then asked me to accidentally deliver a letter to the baker's wife instead of his tailor. Is that legal? Mrs. Gray has 6 cats. I saw them. They stared at me. You nod each time. These are important. Lessons. Historians rarely record the lives of postboy apprentices, but they were the quiet lifeblood of the system, young lads. And occasionally girls disguised under caps, who ran letters down alleys, held horses at waypoints, and learned, one envelope at a time, how the world worked. You remember your first week. Boots too big. Map smudged from rain. That one terrifying moment when someone asked you to explain the tax stamp system and you nearly passed out. You'd written tax? On your hand in ink that never quite came off. Thomas reaches into his satchel and pulls out a crumpled envelope. This one's for old Jenkins, but the name's spelled wrong. What do I do? You examine it. Ah, they've written Jenkins instead of Jenkins, but the address is right. So I still deliver it. You nod. Of course. His house has been misnamed in the parish registry since 1741. No one's ever corrected it. He thinks. It's charming. Thomas looks relieved. That's good. I was afraid I'd have to explain spelling. You rise together and begin walking the final lane houses scattered more loosely now, tucked behind bramble fences and overgrown hedges. The satchels are nearly empty. Only a few letters remain, and Thomas insists on delivering them. You let him. He knocks on doors with cautious pride, hands over envelopes with 2 hands like he's offering rare treasures. You watch from the path as an old woman takes her letter and pats his head. He glows. There's something quietly beautiful about this part of the day when the mail is all but delivered. The lanterns are lit, and the world feels like it's breathing a little more slowly. You pause beside a low stone wall and glance at the sky. The stars are starting to peek through, one by one. Like the letters in your satchel, they don't all show themselves at once. But they're there, silent. Waiting. Thomas sidles up beside you, fidgeting with a loose thread on his coat. Did you ever forget a letter? He asks. You think for a moment. Once, you say. But I remembered in time. I ran it back. 3 miles. Was it important? You nod. It was an apology, written in shaky hand. If I'd been a day later, it might not have mattered. But I got it there, and it did. He doesn't reply. Just looks ahead, thoughtful. You reach the last house on your shared route. A lamp flickers on inside. Thomas runs ahead and hands over the final envelope, a note addressed in green ink, with 3 wax seals and no return name. He runs back, grinning. That was it, last one. You pat his shoulder. Well done. You both begin the walk back to the sorting office, boots crunching over fallen leaves. You both begin the walk back to the sorting office, boots crunching over fallen leaves that scatter like paper scraps in the dusk. The satchels, finally light, bounce gently at your sides. It feels strange, almost dishonest to carry them. Without weight, like being a sailor on a ship with no wind, Thomas is humming now. A tune that might be from the tavern or the chapel, hard to tell, as both tend to borrow from one another in villages like this. You let the sound carry between you and the cool air. There's nothing left to deliver tonight, nothing more to sort or sign. Just footsteps and the soft chime of a bell somewhere behind you as someone closes a shop for the evening dot as you pass the churchyard. Thomas pauses beside the old iron gate. Did letters ever go here? He asks. You nod slowly. Sometimes. People would ask to have a letter read at the grave. Others would leave them behind the headstones, tucked under stones, out of the wind. Even if the person couldn't read it? Especially then, you say, because sometimes the letter isn't to be read. It's to be written. He nods. Doesn't ask more. Back on the road, a barn owl swoops low across the path, silent as fog, and disappears into the tree line. Thomas jumps slightly. Post for the mice, you murmur. He laughs. You reach the sorting house just as the last glow of sunlight disappears behind the hills. The windows are lit inside yellow rectangles floating in the dark. You can see Agnes, bent over the ledgers again, her shawl hiked up over her shoulders like armor against bureaucracy. You push open the door, and the familiar warmth spills out to greet you: ink, oil, old wood, and the faint, lingering ghost of toast. Back. Agnes says without looking up. Delivered, you reply, setting your satchel on the bench. Thomas does the same, mimicking your exact movement with a seriousness that makes you grin. Agnes finally looks up. Lose anything? Just faith in my boots, you mutter. She nods approvingly. That's replaceable. You take your coat off, hang it to dry near the stove, and ease into the chair near the corner desk. Thomas flops onto the rug, stretching out his legs. Agnes passes him a biscuit without a word. He takes it like it's an award. You watch him for a moment, mud on his trousers, ink smudge on his cheek, and a grin that could light up an alley. He'll be good at this, you think? He already is. One day, he'll carry his own bag. Walk the whole route. Know every dog by name, every family by handwriting. He'll learn which letter to deliver with a smile and which to hand over quietly, hat in hand. You reach into your coat and pull out the last item, your notebook. You flip to the last page of the day and write in the bottom margin: Postboy performed admirably. Only minor goose incident. No letters lost. Sunset delivery made. All quiet. You close the book, lean back and sigh. The day is done. The satchel is empty. And in the corner, Thomas is already asleep, biscuit still in hand. You wake the next morning to the soft, rhythmic ticking of the wall clock in the sorting room and the faint rustle of Agnes already preparing today's mailbags. Thomas is still curled up near the stove, covered in someone's old coat and drooling. Slightly onto the rug. The biscuit, remarkably, is gone. You suspect he finished it in his sleep. You stretch. Everything cracks back, knees, possibly your sense of optimism, and you pull yourself to your feet like an old windmill rising for duty. Agnes slides a mug of tea your way without a word. It's strong enough to revive a ghost and twice as bitter, but you nod your thanks and sip anyway. You have one goal this morning: to make sure nothing illegal, immoral, or mildly absurd gets posted through the Georgian postal system. Naturally, you fail before breakfast. Because today is the day of the crimes of the satchel. You check your delivery pile, and there it is, your first suspicious envelope. No return address, sealed in a particularly thick glob of red wax that looks like it was poured with anger. The handwriting is cramped, aggressive, and slightly uphill. You tap it lightly. It doesn't hum, at least. Who posts first thing in the morning? You ask, holding the letter up to the light. Agnes peeks over her ledger. Criminals or suitors? In this village, that's the same person, you mutter. Historians note that the Georgian postal system, while admirably extensive, was occasionally used for activities that strayed well beyond the noble realm of personal correspondence, fraud, smuggling, the odd attempt at coded messages, even espionage. Especially espionage, if you believed everything the local brewer claimed after his third pint. Today's batch includes a letter addressed to the cheeseman. No address. Just that, folded inside, a hand-drawn map and a single word. Tonight. You file that under things not to think about. There's also a tiny box marked buttons and other sundries. Inside, buttons, yes. But also a silver thimble, 2 foreign coins, and a drawing of a very muscular squirrel. You reseal it. Not your circus. Not your squirrel. The post was regulated. Of course. Technically, there were rules about acceptable contents, letters and parcels only. No weapons. No food. No spirited substances, which almost always meant brandy. But people, being people, tended to treat rules as polite suggestions. You've delivered boxes that rattled like dice cups and others that sloshed ominously. One letter smelled so strongly of ink remover you got a headache just carrying it. Another was addressed in invisible ink only legible under lemon juice and mild panic. You pull out another envelope. This one charred slightly at the edge. To the alchemist's cottage, it reads. Of course, the alchemist. He insists on calling. His letters, formulas, and once tried to pay postage with a lump of raw copper. He also claimed to have discovered a potion that improved delivery times. You tested it once. It just made you sneeze in rhyming couplets. Thomas stirs awake now, blinking as he sits up. Do we carry cursed letters? He asks, still groggy. Only. On Mondays, you reply. He yawns, grabs his own satchel, and begins helping with sorting his fingers, fumbling slightly over a particularly lacy envelope addressed in swirls and exclamation marks. This one's to the mayor, but it smells like cloves and scandal. Good. Deliver it quickly, you say, and don't read it. That's an order. Not that reading letters is encouraged. Officially, opening mail not meant for you is a punishable offense. But unofficially, well, sometimes envelopes arrive already opened. It happens. Rain, rats, too much sealing wax, take your pick. You once found a letter so poorly glued that it unfolded mid-gallop and attached itself to your face. Agnes once caught a man in the act of steaming open letters in his kitchen. He claimed he was testing a humidity-based system of authentication. She confiscated his kettle and posted it back to his mother. Some letters contain confessions. Others contain lies. Occasionally both, in alternating paragraphs. There's a known forger in town, Miss Henrietta Penn. The irony is not lost on anyone. She's famous for crafting entire letters on behalf of others. Love letters. Business apologies. The occasional poetic blackmail. Her handwriting is flawless, her spelling impeccable, and her motives unknowable. Today you're carrying one of hers. You can tell by the way the loops of the G curl upward like a satisfied cat. You tuck it into your inner coat pocket. It's best to know where Henrietta's letters are at all times. You recall the tale of a failed smuggling attempt from 3 winters ago, a letter stuffed with powdered nutmeg. The writer claimed it was for medicinal foot rubs. The inspector sneezed for a week and banned nutmeg. Postage indefinitely. Then there was the time a man tried to send his own teeth in the mail, no note, no explanation. Just teeth. That? One earned a special mark in the ledger. Unsettling. You finish the morning sword and sling your satchel over your shoulder again. It's filled with secrets, borderline legal contents, and one rather squishy envelope marked time sensitive and tied with what appears to be a shoelace. Thomas fumbles with his satchel straps and follows you out into the growing light. Do people really post anything? He asks. Oh yes, you say. They post love and guilt, pride and revenge. They post recipes, regrets, and once a live frog in a velvet pouch. Did it survive? It did. Became mayor of the pond. He laughs. You both step onto the lane, the morning beginning proper, and the village blinking awake dot, and somewhere deep in your satchel, under ribbons and wax twine and half-spelled addresses, a letter creaks softly, a secret waiting to be delivered. The sky is cloudless now, a crisp pane of pale blue stretching over the chimneys and rooftops, and the cold air carries the comforting smell of coal smoke and morning bread. You're halfway through your second round of deliveries letters tucked carefully, shoes worn unevenly, and your satchel creaking like it's considering retirement dot as you turn onto Cobbler's Row, a narrow, slightly tilted lane known more for gossip than shoes you feel it. A sudden damp wind pushing against your coat, carrying with it a telltale chill. You look up dot rain is coming. Again dot, and with it comes your old nemesis, Georgian weather. You quicken your pace, but it's already too late. The first drops hit your hat with that soft, smug plip-plip-plip sound, and the air darkens just enough to make everyone start muttering about laundry and ruined pies. You glance down at your satchel, already speckled with damp patches, and say a small prayer to the postal gods for your oiled canvas lining to do its job. Spoiler, it won't. You duck beneath a market, stall's canvas overhang, and check your remaining letters. A small bundle is already curling at the edges, and one dear heavens has begun to wilt. You press it flat with the gentleness of a man handling an aristocrat's last nerve and tuck it deeper into the satchel, wrapped in your scarf. For protection. You've done this before. Too many times. Georgian weather is unpredictable at best, emotionally unstable at worst. It doesn't so much change as it spirals from soft drizzle to biting wind to sleet with a sense of humor. And when you're a postman, your entire day is shaped by it. It seeps into your socks. It warps your letters. It occasionally makes you question whether dry clothing is a myth spread by poets. And then there are the wigs. You pass a window and catch your reflection in the glass. Damp coat, flushed cheeks, and your poor, unfortunate postal wig. It's not official issue, of course. Just something you wear to look presentable when delivering to the upper crust. It was once respectable, powdered, curled, full of hope. Now it clings to your head like a terrified animal and smells faintly of mildew and regret. Wigs, as you've learned, do not like the rain. They soak it up. They sag. They drip. And worse, they sometimes shrink, which leads to the unforgettable wig constriction incident of last spring, when your vision went blurry and you briefly believed you'd entered another dimension. It was just powdered starch running into your eyes. You try adjusting it now, to no avail. It slumps forward dramatically, as if mourning the lost dignity of dry couriers everywhere. Historians note that Georgian fashion was not designed for practicality, especially for those who worked outdoors. Stockings, buckled shoes, layers of wool, all beautiful when dry, all miserable when soaked. Postmen weren't immune to fashion's reach, but many of you, particularly the rural folk, adapted in your own quiet ways. Your coat, for instance, has hidden pockets sewn in for wax, quills, and dry cloth. Your boots repaired so many times they now contain more patch than original leather have. Inner sole is stuffed with old newspaper, which helps a little, unless the rain turns them into literary soup. You make it to the next house, tap gently on the door, and hand over a parcel that squelches faintly when squeezed. The recipient doesn't blink, just mutters finally and disappears indoors. One letter on your route is marked "Do not expose to moisture." You've wrapped it in a waxed cloth, then placed it in a tin, Then wrap the tin in another cloth and place it in a dry pocket under your waistcoat. You check it now, still dry. A small miracle. You deliver it with solemnity to a woman in spectacles who whispers "bless you" and hands you a boiled sweet that smells vaguely of licorice and hope. Then comes the wind. Sharp and sudden. It howls down the lane and lifts your hat clean off your head. You chase it with less grace than you'd like, finally catching it in a puddle beside a goose who seems offended by your lack of decorum. You wring out the brim and consider giving up entirely. But then you remember there are 3 letters left, and one of them has a sprig of rosemary tied to it. And the woman who receives that always says, "Thank you," in a way that makes it sound like you've brought her spring dots as you go on. You pass a row of cottages with smoke puffing from their chimneys, the smell of meat pies wafting onto the road. A child in a doorway waves. You wave back, your fingers stiff but still polite. You deliver a folded pamphlet to the apothecary, who insists on giving you a sample of cough tonic every time. It burns on the way down, and for a moment, you can taste colors. You round the corner to the last stop on this stretch, a low stone house with a garden, full of wilting kale and ambitious snails. You hand over the rosemary letter. The woman smiles, touches your hand lightly, and says, "Tell her I forgive her." You nod. You don't ask. You never do. And just like that, your route is finished. You tuck the remaining scraps into the satchel, shake off your coat, and begin the slow walk back toward the sorting house. The rain has softened now, just a fine mist, enough to blur the world a little and make everything smell like earth and old leaves. Your wig is unsalvageable. Your socks are damp. Your fingers are stained with ink and sympathy. But your satchel, empty now, swings at your side like a flag of quiet victory. Because even in the worst of weather, even when the ink runs and the seals smear and the wind steals your dignity, the post is delivered. And that for today is enough. Night has fully arrived now, folding over the village like a well-worn quilt. Chimneys puff steadily into the cold. Stars blink out in cautious pairs, and behind shuttered windows, letters are being opened, unfolded, and read aloud in the soft glow of candlelight. You're seated at the corner table of the sorting room once again, coat drying by the stove, boots steaming faintly, and your fingers slowly warming around a chipped mug of weak tea. Agnes is asleep in her chair, head tilted, arms crossed, dreaming, probably, of a world where every letter arrives with correct postage and 0 perfume. Thomas is still awake, hunched over the ledger, tongue sticking out slightly as he records today's deliveries with exaggerated precision. Due. I marked down the rosemary letter as miscellaneous or herbal emotional correspondence, he asks. You grin. Herbal. Always herbal. He scribbles with pride. But your rest is short-lived. Because tonight, you've got a special job and assignment that comes only once a year, and only to those trusted enough not to accidentally set anything on fire. Holiday post. It's December after all. Georgian December, to be precise. Which means your next satchel is not filled with politics, business, or overdue taxes. It's filled with knitted oddities, wrapped cakes, and letters that sparkle faintly when turned toward the fire. You hoist the new bag onto the table. It creaks under the strain. A thin layer of flour dust puffs from its seams, promising. Holiday post is a category all its own. Its contents defy logic, postage rates, and frequently sanity. Some of it smells of cloves. Some of it jingles. One package in particular appears to be gently leaking custard. You open the satchel like it's a treasure chest, and immediately regret it. Inside, a flat parcel wrapped in green ribbon, labeled, "For Margaret, do not bend, but do sniff." A round tin that rattles suspiciously, an envelope sealed with wax shaped like a reindeer. melting slightly. A box with holes in it and a note reading "Open carefully. It bites when cold." A card that simply says, "To grandmother." From grandmother. You lay the contents out carefully. Thomas's eyes widen with each item. "I think one of these boxes is humming," he whispers. You press your ear to it. It's probably corollars or bees, possibly both. Holiday deliveries mean extra miles, extra mud, and extra patience. But they also mean something softer, something sweeter. You can feel it in the way the letters are folded, in the careful loops of handwriting, in the sudden spike in phrases like "I miss you" and "stay warm." The usual brisk, transactional tone of the post softens this time of year, like butter melting in a pan. You take the first card, delicately scented with cinnamon and optimism, and slide it into your coat pocket. It's going to the baker's. Niece, who moved 3 villages away and hasn't been home in 6 months. The card is signed, "We saved you a slice anyway." You deliver it first down the slick lane, past the chapel, where the door is open just a crack and candlelight spills. Onto the path. You knock softly. A tired young woman answers. You hand her the card. She presses it to her chest before she even reads it. "Tell them I'm coming on Sunday," she says. You nod. You will doubt the rest of your evening becomes a gentle, snowless flurry of festive absurdity. You deliver a box of knitted socks, each a different length, with a note. Guess which is for which foot? A sealed jar of something brown and unidentifiable with the instructions. Do not open near fire or the baby. A bundle of paper stars, folded so tightly they might burst into wishes, a card with a pressed holly leaf, dangerously close to disintegration, with the words, "Don't eat this one." And of course, several parcels of fruitcake. Dense, moist, possibly. Immortal Dot, you begin to understand why the satchel seemed heavier than usual. It's not just the cake. It's the weight of care, of effort, of warmth tucked into flowery paper and ragged twine. People go a little mad this time of year. But it's the kind of madness that leaves handwritten recipes tucked into packages and tiny knitted scarves for dogs. You once delivered a letter with a sprig of mistletoe inside. You tried to deliver it without looking anyone in the eye. You approach the town square just as the last lamp is being lit. The lamplighter nods. You nod back. Neither of you speaks. You are both employees of order in a season of gentle chaos. At the baker's, you leave behind a round tin with 3 different addresses crossed out and one still legible. Inside, if the smell is anything to go by, is a burnt pie with hopes of redemption. At the rector's house, you slip a letter into the postbox addressed to the baby Jesus via Rev Tillingham. You suspect it's from little Elsie, who earlier tried to trade you a biscuit for a ride in the postcart. Finally, you make your way to the farthest cottage uphill, windward, nearly lost among trees. You've saved this one for last. The parcel is soft, oddly shaped, and wrapped in fabric instead of paper. The note reads, "To the postman who brings me news." You pause. No sender, no signature. Just that. You knock. A woman opens the door, older, quiet-eyed. She takes the parcel, smiles, and hands you a small, lumpy package in return. "For your boots," she says. You open it later. 2 handmade insoles. Wool, stitched with initials you don't recognize. You place them in your boots immediately, and just like that, the bag is empty once more. Holiday post is ridiculous, unbalanced, fragrant, ill-addressed, occasionally alive, and somehow, it's your favorite kind. It's well past supper now, and the stars above are in full bloom, scattered in clusters and thin trails like some divine ink blot. You make your way slowly down the final stretch of road, the satchel limp at your side, empty save for 2 letters. Tucked in the side pocket. Both are headed for the same place, and you've been saving them until the very end, not because they're important, but because they're delicate. And because, frankly, you need a walk to wind down after the fruitcake. Gauntlet. The road to the Weaver farm is long and slightly uphill, lined with hedges that whisper like old women in church. You pass through a wooden gate so warped by time it opens with a groan that could be mistaken for opinion. Beyond it, the house is dark save for one upstairs window glowing with candlelight. You knock gently. No answer. You place the 2 letters 1. Addressed to Mr. Elric Weaver, 1 to his wife. If she's home, on the doorstep, and weigh them down with a pebble, not Trevor, just his cousin. Then you step back, tip your hat to no one in particular, and begin the long walk back to the sorting house. This final stretch of the night is always the quietest. It's the time when your thoughts come loose from the day and start drifting. You think of the letters you carried and the people you saw, of Thomas and his questions, of Agnes and her silent precision. You think about the lady who gave you the insoles, and the one who gave you nothing but a glance and a thank you, shaped like a breath. You think about all the words you've delivered, words of love, of forgiveness, of nonsense and grief, of errands and obligations, and how they all passed through your hands, even just for a moment, even just long enough to fold the flap and adjust the string. The satchel bounces against your side, soft now, satisfied. You glance upward. The stars are sharper here, away from the fires and lanterns. You recognize 1 or 2, the hunter, the plow, but most are strangers. You wonder, briefly, what it would be like to deliver mail to the stars. You suspect the pay would be worse. Wind picks up, gentle and cold, brushing through your coat and whistling through the trees. You pull your scarf higher and button your collar. Somewhere in the distance, a door creaks shut and a dog barks once, lazily, more out of habit than threat. Your boots crunch softly on the path, each step familiar. You've walked this same stretch hundreds of times, maybe thousands. But tonight, it feels softer, quieter, like the road is grateful you're still walking at dot as you near the sorting house. A faint light glows in the lower window. Agnes, still awake. Or just the stove? Thomas's snore curls into the night air through the cracked upstairs window. He must have gone back after supper and fallen asleep. Mid-sentence again. You stop just outside the door and take a long breath. There's something about this moment, this exact hour, when the mail is done and the world is holding still, waiting for the next round of ink and wax and footsteps. A breath held between pages. A pause between deliveries. You step inside, set your empty satchel on its hook, and shrug off your coat. The room is warm, gently lit. Agnes is gone or asleep. The tea is cold. You don't mind. You reach for your notebook and write one last. Line for the day. Letters, 42. Parcels, 13. Surprises, too many to count. No injuries except pride. No losses except farthing CPG 27. You close the notebook and sit back in your chair. Tomorrow it starts again. More letters. More mud. More goats, probably. But for now, you've done your part. You've walked. The roads dodged the geese, soothed the lonely, and carried the voices of others on your shoulder until they reached the right ears. And that's enough. You wake the next morning just before dawn when the sky is a deep velvet blue and everything is still holding its breath. The sorting house is quiet, save for the tick of the clock and the soft crackle of the stove where Agnes must have stoked. It's sometime during the night. Thomas is still asleep upstairs, likely tangled in his blanket and dreaming about uniform buttons or running from letters with teeth. You stretch, bones stiff, joints popping like distant musket fire. You stand slowly and open the shutters just a crack. Outside, the village is still tucked into itself. No wagons, No shopkeepers sweeping their stoops. Just the hush of early morning, and the faint outline of frost curling around the edges of windows like lace. You dress quietly, pulling on each layer with muscle memory. Stockings, breeches, shirt, waistcoat, coat, scarf, boots. Wig optional still. Damp from yesterday's encounter with the puddle, and for once, you think you'll go bareheaded and honest. You pick up the Satchel dots empty. But it won't stay that way for long. You sling it over your shoulder, and something about the familiar weight even without weight settles into your spine like a breath you didn't know you were holding. You step outside Dot, and this morning, before the letters arrive, before the roads fill with carts and the bakery opens its doors and the widow Thornby yells at her rooster again, you walk Dot no route, no urgency. Just the path leading toward the edge of the village, the first light of the sun tugging softly at the sky. The birds are only beginning to stir. A few sheep blink sleepily at you from behind a dry stone wall. One sneezes. You nod. In return, your boots crunch gently over frozen leaves, and the air smells like wood smoke and damp stone. Your breath fogs as you pass the bridge, the water beneath still dark and slow. You stop there for a moment, watching it flow a letter's journey in reverse, returning to its source. The satchel shifts slightly as you move, the leather creaking with memory. It has carried confessions and condolences, apologies and invitations, recipes, secrets, shoes, cheese, letters from the lonely and packages from the hopeful. It has been dropped, chewed, drenched, blessed, and once, briefly, set on fire. And yet, it endures. You run your hand over its side-scuffed, patched, worn smooth in places, and whisper something absurdly fond. Then you turn, back to the sorting house, back to Agnes and her ledgers, back to Thomas, who will ask another 17 questions before breakfast, back to letters waiting to be read and names waiting to be spoken aloud again. But first, one more stop. You detour up a narrow footpath toward the top of the hill just east of the village, the one where, on clear mornings, you can see the whole town unfurling below like a map made of rooftops, smoke, and stories. You reach the crest, boots crunching against frostbitten grass, and look down at the waking world. Chimneys beginning to stir, a rooster crowing, a curtain twitching open. Somewhere down there, the mail will soon be delivered. Letters will be opened. Words will be spoken or cried over or laughed at. Some will be burned. Others tucked away in drawers for years. A few will be read aloud, slowly like prayers. And each of them, for a short time, will write in your Satchel. You close your eyes. The sun slips over the edge of the horizon, gold and soft, and the road begins again. The road quiets behind you now. The village settles in for the night fires dimmed, shutters closed, letters opened and set beside half-empty teacups. Somewhere, someone reads a note aloud twice just to feel the shape of the words. Somewhere else, a parcel sits on a windowsill, unopened, waiting for morning. And you? You hang your satchel by the door. You loosen your boots, stretch your arms, and ease into your chair as the last coals glow in the hearth. Outside, a dog sighs in its sleep. A barn owl coasts silently past the chimney. You've done your rounds. The roads have been walked. The puddles splashed through. The parcels delivered. The people you visited may not remember your face, but they will remember the feeling of receiving a letter, of hearing from someone, of being thought of, even if only in ink. Your coat dries by the fire. The kettle hums softly, not boiling, just keeping you company. The logs creak as they settle. Breathe. The world will still be here tomorrow. There will be more letters, more geese, probably. More stories to carry. But tonight is quiet. So let yourself rest. Let the stillness wrap around you like a warm wool blanket. Let the soft ticking of the clock be your lullaby. You've walked far. You've done well.